Welcome, Danny. Welcome to the Jeff Schneider Situation, as this podcast is hilariously called. Thanks for making the time.
My pleasure, Jeff. I like that name. The Jeff Schneider Situation. I like it.
Thank you. And I like that shirt. I mean, that's
Thanks,
it's killing.
Love Supreme.
It's for everybody who's listening and not watching this podcast, Danny has on an amazing A Love Supreme t-shirt, which is, of course, one of John Coltrane's most famous records. And I think you said your mom got that for you, right?
My mom got it. I have a cool mom, man. she likes my passions, and she's always been supportive. So this is just another really cool thing that she's gotten to encourage me to keep going. You know, she gets me cool jazz shirts.
I love it. Well, that's kind of an interesting segue, because I wanted to ask you to give a little bit of background about how you came up playing music, and it sounds like support from your mom was an integral part of that. So,
well, support from my
start
family,
wherever you want on the timeline.
For sure. Support from my family was really, it was kind of integral in my development. So like, something that I have been thinking about, Jeff, a lot lately has been not so much about like talent, but a lot about opportunity, and a lot about how timing and opportunity presents itself to people that are sort of destined to do things for themselves and for the community, and give back that same opportunity that they got. So for instance, my upbringing in music was greatly in part by, first of all, my parents being able to live in an area that was close enough to Los Angeles, but far enough away that we were actually in the pocket of a community of very, very successful studio musicians, and also writers and composers and engineers, and just a whole situation, for lack of a better word, of really, really great role models to be around.
Were your parents musicians as well?
They aren't. And that's kind of the cool part, is that my parents, they've been in marketing and licensing business for many years. My dad's had a company for many years, and my mom has also worked with him, and she's done a lot of things on her own, but mostly branding and marketing. And so like I grew up around very business-minded people, and then the only person that was a musician in my family was my grandfather, and he was the most supportive of me. He bought me my first instruments, and he always took me to concerts, and was hipping me to like really cool standards and records, and he was always encouraging me, taking me to festivals.
Did he play saxophone?
He didn't actually. Funny enough, actually, my dad played saxophone, but like only like rock saxophone in a band. Like he played tenor. I still actually have his 1927 tenor, wow, which plays really great. It's kind of got a very special sound. It's hard to. I want to sell it, but it's like really hard to like get rid of it, because it's emotional attachment. It was my first tenor. That was my first tenor, 1927 Con. But my grandfather played guitar. Like you do. I see is that a bass behind you or a guitar?
This is a bass. That's a guitar.
Oh, okay. So I was right. It's a bass guitar and a guitar.
I noodle.
That's cool. I don't even noodle yet, but I do want to start playing guitar, because of my grandfather passed away last year, and he left me some of his best guitars. Wow. A 1934 Gretsch guitar, which is just in mint condition. Oh yeah, it's a Gretsch. It's in mint condition. It's a jazz hollow body. It's like unbelievable guitar. So that'll be a future endeavor of mine to kind of learn that in his honor. But yeah, that was for me. Family was more like emotional support. Like, you know, like they didn't think that I was crazy for wanting to play music, for wanting to practice all the time. Even though nobody else in my family was doing that, and nobody else besides my friends in school were like really committed to that, they fueled my passion much like they did when I was in martial arts when I was much younger. They really helped me by encouraging me to continue to be disciplined in learning the martial arts. And then when I was transitioning that focus to music, it was very, very encouraging atmosphere for me to grow into, to blossom into. And as you know, Jeff, like it takes so long to get past the stages of like basics on woodwind instruments or just in general on any instrument, I think. But like for me, it didn't really come naturally that I was like playing like great stuff. Like, I mean, they must have heard me play terribly for years and years and years, because I was playing long tones, I was playing scales all the time, I was playing etudes,
Saxophone's one of those instruments that, you can be practicing and you might be doing a great exercise. It's really good for you, but it just sounds terrible to everyone else, because you're honking away.
Exactly.
No one knows you're trying to get like that overtone, that's, a couple steps up. It might feel a lot of good later on, but
we all got vibed in the practice room in college next to somebody who was trying to sing opera, and then we were practicing long tones or overtones, and they were just, you know what I mean? But like, so that was the vibe in my family. They didn't think that I was crazy or weird or strange, even though I was out of the normal in my family, and they supported those endeavors, and they encouraged me to study with great people. My father was always helping me connect with different musicians around the area, trying to get me some local gigs. He really helped me, hustling like a restaurant gig when I was like 14, 15, just learning tunes, and those kind of things, honestly, and having great mentors and seeking out advice from people that were older, those kind of things, because I was, I guess, talented enough to realize that it was something that I was passionate about. Because in a way, you kind of have to recognize your own talent early on in order to like feel that passion. You can't just be, I think a lot of people confuse humility with insecurity. And I think it's important to acknowledge, okay, maybe you are good enough to do this, but you have to believe in yourself, and you have to be humble enough to seek guidance. And I think that's when you start making the real strides in your career, in your playing, when you're humble enough to realize, okay, this is a gift that was given to me. Not everybody's this good at the saxophone. Not everybody's this good at hearing, a good tone on the saxophone. Not everybody has put in the time to get to that place. And now how do I reach out to people that can give me the tools and help me progress towards just a higher level of thinking and conceptualizing on the horn and in the music. And so that's why I say it's really important to acknowledge, all these things, especially to recognize those who you want to model yourself after. And unfortunately, I think for the younger generation, something that I'm concerned about is that they're not really attached to, we grew up at a time, Jeff, like you and I grew up at a time where we had access to a lot of masters. I mean, it's not a lot, but many masters, because they were around, and there's still a few of them around. But the OG legends, it's something that I feel really passionate about, that coming in contact with those type of people, like one of the things that I hold really dear to my heart from a memory when I was growing up, like a childhood memory. I was 13 years old, and my father took me to the Village Vanguard. It was one of my first. It was literally one of my first shows that I ever saw.
Me too. Same here. Maybe it was the same show.
at Lou Donaldson?
No, but I did see my first jazz show at the Vanguard. It was the Monday night big band.
That is a great band. I've seen them and I've played with them a couple times, but I've seen them like countless times. They had me sub in a couple times many years ago. But that band is just unbelievable. I freaking love them.
You saw Lou Donaldson for your first show there?
Yeah, and it's crazy. So like Lou is actually one of those guys that's still on the scene, so it's a perfect example of like somebody that has supported so many young musicians over the years. And so I was 13 years old. I had just started playing a couple years prior. I started playing when I was 11. So this is my 20th year playing music, if you can believe it. I hit my halfway point 10 years ago. um, and Lou saw me in the back of the club, and we connected because I was like a kid, and he came up to me and he said, "What are you doing here, young man?" And I said, "Mr. Donaldson, I've been listening to your records. I've been listening to your work with Clifford Brown. I absolutely adore your music. I love your sound. I love your playing." And he was playing with Dr. Lonnie Smith on the organ, and a great guitarist and drummer. So it was a quartet. Mm-hmm. And I really will never forget this moment because, he spent a little bit of time with me, and then he went back for the second set, and he went back on stage, played a song or two, and then lo and behold, he like gave me like a shout out from the stage and like said like, "I just met this young man in back. He's so young that I don't know how he plays the saxophone, because when I was his age, I didn't even know how to tie my own shoes." And then he went into the most beautiful, at the time, the most beautiful version I had ever heard of any ballad, but especially something that I was really familiar with and everybody knew, and it was "Somewhere Over the Rainbow." And he just played so amazingly, and he dedicated that song to me.
Wow.
And I just remember leaving that moment, leaving that experience, and knowing that like that memory will be with me in my heart for like my entire life. And those kind of moments that you get to have, or that I was blessed to have a few with people that truly were the originators of the music.
Yep.
It's so vital. I think it's not just about shedding. It's not just about taking lessons. It's not just about transcribing records and checking out YouTube videos. You can have all the chops in the world, but the X factor is being connected to the music in that way that only you can really get from coming in contact with somebody who created it.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you say that, your fear of a newer generation is not having that connection.
Yeah.
In a way, there is a lot of access with YouTube and seeing old videos of the greats and master classes from, people who aren't around anymore and so on. But you're right, having that actual, connection of being in the same room and that experience is pretty special. So
it's irreplaceable. If I can be completely honest, it's irreplaceable. And I do think that there is sort of, for lack of a better word, and I hope this doesn't sound too harsh, but there's a sort of entitlement and ignorance that goes along with thinking that you can learn this music without going to be a part of the community. You know what I mean? Without actually reaching out and being a part of the community. And I think it's okay that people are, if you're in, a remote country without any musicians and you're learning music on YouTube, and of course that's great. Of course you're doing the best you can do. But I think in order to like really, really understand this music and the language, it takes that sort of human connection to a community and being around people that inspire you like in person. I don't think you can get that energy without being in the same room with somebody that's way better than you. Like for instance, when I was studying with Oates a little later on, so that was when I was 13. When I was studying with Dick Oates, I went to school at Temple University in Philadelphia, and I was from kind of a suburban area in Los Angeles called Agora Hills. I was born there, born in Tarzana, raised in Agora Hills. And so after 17, 18 years of being in a Jewish centralized sort of suburb of Los Angeles, I went to school in one of the roughest neighborhoods in the entire United States. And North Philadelphia is very much a black ghetto. And at the time, it was even more dangerous than it is now. And a lot of my friends were getting, mugged and held up at gunpoint around campus and even just around the city in general. And it was just a very different environment to transition to right away. And when I was studying there, and I mention that because perspective is a huge part in this music. Perspective on social climates, perspective on people's situations, where they come from, where you come from in regards to where else somebody else comes from, and having that perspective really informed me and made me grow in leaps and bounds.
Yeah.
Not just shedding 8 hours a day in college, but going
behind the notes.
Yes, definitely. And having the opportunity, again, going back to opportunity, having the opportunity to go and play funk, R&B, soul with people that were living it and breathing in it, a community of people where, yeah, I'd walk in the room and they would ask me to open my saxophone case at the door because they thought I was taking guns in because everybody else had gats. You know what I mean? Like those clubs in North Philly, yeah, I was the only white person in the room and full of people that didn't look like me. Let's just say that, and didn't come from the same Jewish suburb that I came from. But putting myself in those situations and around musicians that were, that was their community. That was their community, and they allowed me to be part of it because they saw that I was respectful enough and diligent enough to act accordingly and try to play my best around them. And those opportunities that I was given countless times, whether it was a jazz blowing session, a straight ahead jam session, or it was like I said, an R&B hip hop kind of thing. Those moments they pushed me hard, like really hard, to become better and a better listener and a better improviser and have more flexibility and durability with my sound and my approach and my rhythm, mostly my rhythm. And it expanded my entire concept of what black music was, because it really did start, the passion really did start with Duke Ellington and Cannonball Adderley and Charlie Parker, you know what I mean? But then transitioned into a very real understanding during those 4 years at Temple University, where I was really playing on the Philadelphia scene, into an understanding of that it's a lineage of black music that comes from a culture that's very deep and very embedded, with a deep understanding of the church and a deep understanding of the blues, and a deep respect for rhythm. Just that's really what it comes down to. And Philly really gave me a lot of those insights, and especially studying with Dick Oates. And what I was going to say before is that being in the room with somebody like Dick Oates, who has that beautiful sound, who has that gorgeous tone. Speaking of the Monday night at the Vanguard, Thad Jones, Mel Lewis tribute band, Dick Oates plays lead, as some of you may know who's watching this podcast. His sound, and I just have to say this, his sound, listening to that every time I took lessons with him, or even when I was just hanging with him, or when I went to see him at the Vanguard, or when I went to see him play in Philadelphia when we were just hanging out, his sound was so gorgeous in any context, any context. I mean, he can play a ballad, and it could be solo saxophone, and he can take 15 minutes on a cadenza, and it would just make your jaw drop. But at the other side of the token, he can turn around and play, same on the same setup on alto. He can play the most funky, fat things you ever heard, just fat rhythm, funky, just unbelievable stuff. And it was a testament to me that it doesn't matter about your setup, it doesn't matter about your equipment so much. It matters about your concept. It matters about your understanding of how to I say to some of my students, throw your sound and pull it back, and have that understanding of like, really projecting, and then also sort of just reeling it back in as almost like you're fishing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You can cast such a broad, beautiful approach, and then you can reel it back in. And I think those lessons that I learned during those 4 years at Temple University, whether it was from the community at large or from Dick Oates or from Terrell Stafford, who led the big band, it really it gave me the tools to help me unfold my growing perspectives and concepts in the music. And so, years later now, I've been out of school for several years. I graduated in 2011. I came back to LA, and started my professional career here when I was 22, after having subbed in the Vanguard and stuff, and thankfully, because Dick Oates allowed me to, and basically just from that point, I just committed myself to not selling out in the music and always being genuine to these lessons and opportunities that I was blessed to have, and always holding true to the things that I knew to be facts about the music, which is that it is a Black American art form. It is very tied in with the blues. The blues has always been the most important thing to me in learning this music. As you see, Charlie Parker's in back. For me, when I started hearing Charlie Parker play, I was just like, how on earth can you play so much blues, but also have so much delicacy in your approach? Like it was so polished and so raw at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And that was something that I really admired about certain musicians that I was listening to growing up. I mean, we can talk about those things till I'm blue in the face, but like, Cannonball, Sonny Stitt, Dexter Gordon, Hank Mobley, John Coltrane, George Coleman, all these people had this understanding. Even, Stan Getz, Phil Woods, Michael Brecker, like, it's not about being Black. It's about having the understanding that whatever you play is tied deeply and rooted to a tradition that is so inherently rhythmic and funky and feel good. And so when I was growing up, I was very attracted to players that just had such a deep understanding of the blues and had such a deep connection to what we were talking about, which is sort of that X factor, that energy, that soulful magnetism that not only would bring the listener in, but would bring their musicians in, and everybody could just sonically on record or even live, when Lou Donaldson was playing, it just, you couldn't sit there and not be moved. Like there's no way that you can ignore the emotion in that music. And I just, that was my connection to the music early on, was that it was a soulful experience. It was spiritual, and it was like a deep language that resonated with me. And as I was able to learn more and more about the vocabulary and grow my technique and continue to expand everything that we're talking about, the appreciation kept growing, and as I kept teaching the music and talking about it, it's only fueled the fire of my passion to become more understanding about these things that I'm talking about, all across the board, and committed to educating people about the origins of the music and the culture of the music in the best way that I can possibly do.
So how do you teach this stuff?
By just talking about it, by teaching it, by asking my students, by challenging my students to do their homework deeper, by asking them to do their research. For instance, last night at Cal State Northridge, where I teach a combo class, my students brought in arrangement of SF Jazz, one of SF Jazz's arrangements of the Horace Silver tune "Song for My Father," and I asked them some simple questions. I said, "Do you guys know about this group?" "No, we just know this arrangement. We know this record." Well, that's not enough. That's not enough. You have to, in order to play somebody's tune, in order to perform somebody's music, I think it takes a deep study of what it is that you're dealing with. So the SF Jazz Collective, not that I'm, qualified to really speak on their behalf, but, they've been around for a while. They've had different incantations. They've had different versions of that collective. In order to play their music, you have to know that whole story. You have to know how they're funded, how they get their grant, what it is that where they came from, who created the group, how did they get to the concept of doing cover records where they're exploring people's music, like what, and know all of their records. And I think just that level of research gives you so much more of an appreciation for what it is that you're dealing with, whether it is SF Jazz or it is just the Horace Silver tune. And not to discredit Horace, you should do the research on Horace too if you're going to play his song.
Sure.
You should always, and you should know all of Horace's records. And I think just that level of diving deep into the music and crediting people and understanding that you have to give credit where it's deserved. I just think that is not really talked about that much. So I encourage my students very, very much and regularly to continue doing their cultural research about how to connect with the music that they're playing with, and because I think it really informs your music. I mean,
it goes right back to putting the meaning behind those notes and making
exactly.
and add so much color to the experience of playing music and your own creativity versus just notes on a page. I mean, that's such a stale experience in comparison.
It really is. And I think for whatever reason in jazz education, for lack of an understanding, because I don't really understand it, it's been boiled down to unfortunately a little bit more of a classical music approach that I don't think includes this commitment to the culture that has brought it to be the coolest music in the world, and also has inspired so much other music from the era of jazz.
And I think on a really explicit level, we were talking about rhythm before, and things might have changed since I was in school, but I just remember in all my years of learning jazz, rhythm, aside from private lessons, rhythm was always something that was not as emphasized as learning chords and scales and things of that nature. And you were making the point before about how rhythm is the essence of the music. And I always tell my students, and in the videos that I make, you can have the best lines and licks and arpeggios in the world. If the rhythm is not there, it's going to fall flat. And on the reverse, you can play a bunch of wrong notes, but if your rhythm is strong and your feel is strong, you can get away with so much because rhythm is really at the essence of it.
I mean, you can play like a one note solo and say so much more than somebody that's chopping out on like Coltrane matrices and trying to play all their information in one chorus. You can play one note and be rhythmic with it, and somehow that translates even more. Don't ask me how any of that works, because it's not explainable. But I know that the connection that you have, here's to me what the music boils down to is three things. And I share this with my students, every new student that I have. It's melodic voice leading, harmonic voicings, and rhythmic dialogue. That's it, honestly. That is what the music is. I've had this conversation with many people that I respect, and that's what the music really boils down to. Yes, it's inherent that you have to have an understanding of the culture. It's inherent, but within the actual playing of the music, if you play melodic voice leading, if you play harmonic voicings, if you have an understanding of those things, and then you bring that into the conceptualization of how do I speak to the other musicians? How do I converse in a dialogue with that mindset of playing melodic voice leading and harmonic voicings? And how do I bring that into a rhythmic dialogue? That is the essence of this music. And if all three parts are not in sync with each other, I do think that people suffer and they feel weak when they're playing. And obviously your sound has to be together, your basics have to be together. But to me, that's really where I'm coming from when I teach this music is those three components. And it's really important to me that students pay attention to that rhythmic dialogue perspective of hey, yeah, it's not just about learning licks. It really isn't. Actually, it's never been about that. That's just sort of a simplification of the system of jazz education that has been easiest to pass information on. Oh, here's a lick, take it in all 12 keys. Oh, here's another lick, take it in all 12 keys. Oh, just learn this lick. Just learn this lick. Just learn this pattern. And unfortunately, I think it's just not that simple. It never has been that simple. It's never been, because yes, it's important to learn licks and patterns and have, facility on your horn or whatever instrument you play. But if you're not using your ears, if your ears aren't wide open when you're playing this music, you're missing the point. You're missing so much of the point. And I think that's a deep thing that I see with people that do learn this music on YouTube and do learn this music off Instagram. It's like, yeah, maybe they have good ears enough to play licks and play, your patterns back or my licks back or whatever, but it's not connected to anything yet because they haven't connected to what I'm talking about with that community, with that rhythmic dialogue, with that conceptualization of how to converse within this medium. And so I encourage everybody that's listening to this to shed with people that hopefully they have friends, even if it's just like, for me, like when I was in school, yeah, hopefully you have friends, but hopefully you have friends that play music. I was lucky that I was around a few people in college and high school and even middle school that were passionate about practicing and would come over, and I would come over to their house and we'd rehearse and we'd, but that kind of thing, playing with people that are maybe on your level, maybe a little worse than you, maybe a little better than you, it doesn't matter, but that you can come together and elevate your own understanding of this concept, about the rhythmic dialogue concept. That's really the only way. I think it just takes putting in that time to listen and play with people that are trying to grow in that way. There's really no other way. I mean, you can sit in a practice room with a metronome all you want, but it can only do so good for you. It can only do so much for your growth on this musical front that I'm talking about.
I think a really specific example of that is somebody, in the practice room on their own, is working through patterns and lines and things, and maybe rhythmic concepts, and they have the metronome on and their time is good and it's great. And then you go to play with somebody else, like a drummer, who's going to start messing around with the time a little bit, and suddenly it's like, wait a minute, there's this level of, I don't know what's happening out there. I don't have control of what's happening externally anymore, and that can be a real awakening. A rude awakening for a lot of people.
Such a rude awakening.
You need to have experience playing with other people, because really that's what it's all about.
It's so important. It's so important. So my journey from that point, from college and stuff like that, after I moved back to LA, I really felt passionate about, keeping on composing and pursuing being a band leader, not just being a sideman waiting for the phone calls, not just being an educator, because I was happy to be an educator, I was happy to teach privately, I was happy to do everything, but I really wanted to invest in making records, making videos, and I'm still doing those investments, still it's a constant journey. We just did a show a couple days ago at the Blue Whale in Los Angeles on Valentine's Day, and some of that footage will be released. I was just actually right before we talked, I was just listening back to the first mixes of that sound recording, and the video looks good. And I guess I want to stress to young musicians or whoever is going to be watching this, audiences, that it's really a commitment. And I say that not so lightly. I say, like, if you want to pursue putting your music out there, for instance, like Jeff Schneider's brand, like Danny Janklow's brand, it takes a lot of commitment to putting that content out there and creating that content and believing in that content and developing that content over time. And I think it's not just a time commitment. It's a monetary commitment. It's a commitment to knowing that, hey, if you cut corners, if you don't get the right video people, if you don't get the right engineer, if you don't get the this and that or whatever, if you're not making the commitment in the right ways, you will feel that somewhere down the line you will see the repercussions of that. You have to do things the right way. You have to treat people the right way. You have to treat your musicians the right way. You have to pay people what they deserve. You have to give credit where credit's due in every aspect of this career. And when you do that consistently, when you stretch, and have longevity as a band leader, and people start really messing with you and in a good way, coming to your shows and buying your records and stuff like that, it does pay off. But it doesn't pay off right away. And I think a lot of people growing up may think that, hey, if I put a record out and nobody buys it, that means I failed. That's not true. And not to say that I had that experience, but it just doesn't work like that. You have to continue to have the commitment to doing it for many, many years and not stop doing it, and believe in yourself and believe in your community, believe in your musicians, and create a collective of people that you trust and believe in you, and we'll take that journey with you. And that's really the only thing you can do. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like, the business end of things is very similar to the musical end. It's being consistent, it's showing up and playing the long game, because your playing is not going to develop overnight. Your business is not going to develop overnight, and it's being, patient enough to play that long game and know that if you stick with it, you'll come out better on the other side.
Absolutely. I mean, it costs a lot to even just get good at music. Like, how many thousands and thousands of dollars have we spent on instruments and lessons and school and traveling for auditions and music?
And then the more sort of metaphorical costs of, sacrificing some social experiences when you're growing up and just spending more time in a little room by yourself than, going out to parties or whatever.
I went crazy practicing when I started playing clarinet and flute. I just stopped hanging out with people because I was like, oh, well, I'm in high school. I just picked up, the clarinet. It's a little late. I'm playing flute. Just picked up flute. It's a little late. I need to get really good at these instruments if I want to be a working musician, because everybody that I see around me, the studio musicians that I was talking about, wow, they were so good at these instruments. I mean, they were perfection at the clarinet and flute and whatever doubles they chose. And yeah, I mean, yeah, you do sacrifice social life. You do sacrifice, hey, oh, my friends are going to a party in high school. Well, I have to stay home so that I can, prepare this music for my lesson. I have to stay home so I don't sound like an idiot when I go to my teacher, who's, an older, his name was Vince Trombetta Sr. He was an older Italian man that, he wouldn't sit there and be like, oh, great job, especially if I didn't deserve it. He actually never really complimented me, and that's okay. I'm happy that I had a teacher for like 7 years that I went to weekly that just gave me straight honesty, and was really disciplined about how it was really sounding, and how I was progressing. I guess what I'm trying to say here, and it goes back to before we started this podcast, we were talking about martial arts, and Jeff shared with me that he's recently been studying some martial arts. I have a history in my childhood of studying and teaching martial arts for many years. When I was 14 and a half years old, I got my 3rd degree black belt. When I was 9 and a half, I got my first degree
in
black
karate,
belt.
you said, right?
In Tang Sudo karate. And so I started teaching when I was 9 and a half, 10 years old. I started teaching karate full time. I mean, not full time, but that was my first job. I remember making my first $20 bill after, teaching a couple classes when I was 9 and a half. Yeah. And it was weird because the instructor didn't show up, and then he came like 3 hours after. I taught 3 hours worth of classes, and then he showed up after that. I think it was a test, honestly, because he showed up and he was just like, how'd it go? I was just like, dude,
I'm teaching other 9-year-olds?
I was teaching people that were way older than me.
Wow.
But because I was a black belt, I just got my black belt, it was mandatory that I started teaching classes at that studio. I was one of the youngest black belts at the time in Tang Sudo, American Tang Sudo history. It was really a strange position to be in, to just be thrown in the deep end. But I guess what I'm trying to say is, martial arts gave me that sort of discipline to get knocked down, get your butt handed to you, and then just get up and getting back and doing that thing better. And I think that in this music, if you're not willing to get knocked down, if you're not willing to get punched in the gut and lose all your air and then get back into the ring and play even better the next time, that you're not going to see the full potential of your own musical development. I think it takes risking it all constantly and being respectable about how you risk it in the music, in your development. And yeah, we risked a lot to become who we are because we knew that was the only choice that we had. To go back to the magnetism, the music was a magnet for us to want to get better. And so I think that it takes that sort of courage in order to grow into your best self, whether you're being a jazz musician or whatever you want to call it, or a doctor, or a rocket scientist, or whatever you want to be. I think it takes that sort of courage in order to grow into your best self. And I don't think a lot of people like to talk about it because it's sort of ugly. Yeah, you got to fail. You have to fail. How many countless times was I at a session and took too many courses on a standard and got vibed out afterward, or wasn't outlining the changes well enough and then got vibed out afterward. But
or our hypothetical person who's practicing on their own and they go to a session and the drummer, messes with the time and they're completely lost. It's like you need that experience of getting your ass kicked. So
if you've never been lost before in the music, then you're not doing something right. You know what I mean?
You're playing with the wrong people.
Yeah, then you're playing with the wrong people. If you haven't been on stage and felt like the carpet came right from under you and you slipped and fell right on your face, if you haven't had that experience multiple times in your career, then the humility and the discipline of your development has not reached its full potential. And that's what's so interesting about this internet culture, is that people think that you need to be so great all the time because people are always filming you, people are always doing this, going live, whatever, and it's fine. I will say that we didn't grow up playing this music in this environment. This generation has it very differently than we did in that aspect, which is like, I wasn't like fearing that like, oh, my stuff would be like permanently on YouTube forever. But now that's just the case, but even so, it takes a lot of courage when you get out there, and you have to be able to trip and fall and get up and dust yourself off and kick some butt the next time. And actually, you know what? People respect that. I remember going to Ortlieb's in Philadelphia.
What's that?
Ortlieb's in Philadelphia. It was a jazz club in Philly. And Ortlieb's was a vibe. It was like Mike Boone, Sid Simmons, R.I.P., rest in peace, great piano player, and Byron Wookie Landum. Those guys were the house band. And I would go and sit in with them almost every night. I mean, they were the house band there. They played the jam. They would open up late at night. And I knew there was some stuff going on. There was some shady business, not with those guys, but, with the club, they were closing down afterward, and I'm sure there was some weird stuff going on. But, you'd go put yourself in positions like that to be around musicians like that would be honest with you, that would be so honest, and not just in a teacher-student way, but in a, hey, we appreciate that you're here. We want you to grow. You weren't playing good tonight. You didn't sound good.
Yeah.
This is why. This is why. And I think that a lot of young musicians are not receptive to this kind of criticism. You need to have tough love in order to grow. This is black music. If you're not going to respect the tradition, if you're not going to respect the culture, if you're not going to take that criticism and sit with it and marinate on it, then where are you going to get that sort of growth from? You can't. I mean, it's not like Dexter Gordon is going to, come down from the heavens and tell you, hey, you're not playing enough, 2/5 licks in the right way. Like, that's not going to happen. It's like, and you can't rely on your college professors to be giving you that kind of tough love, because quite honestly, colleges are not set up for that kind of mentorship. You have to reach out to those sort of mentors in order to get that honesty. And I think it comes back to what I talked about at the beginning, which is putting yourself in the right situations to grow from the opportunities around you. And I sought out those opportunities time after time after time after time after time after time. So when people hear me play on Instagram, it's a result of all of these experiences. It's not a result of playing with the metronome all the time. It's not a result of just taking lessons all the time. Or ripping off solos or whatever, or classical etudes. It's a result of all of that, plus all of these life experiences and all these opportunities that I've put myself out there for, and have learned through tough love, learned through failures, learned through absolute trials and tribulations, learned through embarrassing moments, personal sacrifices. And at the end of the day, full throttle passion for the music that moves me forward every single day and makes me want to grow into a better version of myself for the community. And that's where I'm coming from in everything that I say and everything that I play, is really that.
And I think everybody that's listening, if you're overwhelmed by all the different facets that Danny just went through, don't forget what we said before about how be patient. It's the long game. You don't have to have all of those experiences and practice all of those things in a month or in a year or in 10 years. I mean, Danny I don't know if this was before the podcast or on, but you were just commenting on how this is your 20th year of playing. These experiences pile up and accumulate, and it doesn't need to happen overnight.
It doesn't. And it can't, honestly, it can't happen overnight. That's one of the things I want to stress, is that for young musicians, seeing, these people on Instagram and thinking, oh, this guy's an overnight success, or, I have a lot of people that think I'm much younger than I actually am. I'm 30 years old. I'm turning 31 in May. And, I've been writing music now for 12, 13 years. I've been leading a band, for many, many years of my life, but my Elevation Band project has been something I've been working on since 2015. So it's like, that's 5 years right there to develop that, put out a couple records, Elevation and Worlds Collide. It's like, and that stuff didn't happen overnight. It was an accumulation of many, many years of writing tunes that maybe didn't work out, doing recording sessions that maybe didn't work out, having bands that maybe didn't pan out, and then finding people creating your community. It's a trial and error thing.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't see that it's not an overnight success. None of this is, for any of us. And it takes so much commitment. I just want to stress that to the young people that are listening, is it's just so important to, yes, be patient with yourself, be patient with people around you, but also be hungry. I don't see enough people that are hungry for the right things anymore. I see a lot of people that are hungry for information, but they're not hungry for experiences. And information can only bring you to a certain plateau or a certain level, but experiences can mold your life into something that's worth expressing.
That's really powerful, Danny. That's great. I like that a lot.
Thank you, Jeff. Man, it's been a pleasure to rap with you, man. I'm having a good time.
Likewise. I feel like we could go on and on and on here.
We definitely could.
We'll have to try this again at some point. But
I'm always down. I'm glad we finally connected.
Me too. Well, do you want to let people know where they can find out more about you? If you have any project that you'd like to promote, this is the time.
Sure. Well, like I said, I have a couple records out. Elevation came out in 2017. That was something I recorded in 2015. So talk about the process. It took 2 years to get that record out. I recorded it in May of 2015. It wasn't released until October 2017. Knowing the climate at that time, Donald Trump was just getting, so much hype, and the primary wasn't going well for the Democrats, and it wasn't a good time to release music in 2016 when I wanted to release it. So I just held off. It was really hard for me to not release that record, having had finished it, having had produced it for so many months and years leading up to that. But I had to hold on to it because of certain PR things. Investing in that PR situation was, a good investment as well. So that record is from 2017, Elevation. Some people on my Instagram play some of those songs, like California, Gemini Vibe, Bad Reception. And then there's a record that I released last spring, called it's an EP. It's called Worlds Collide. And that both of those records are online. There's new videos on the way from this live show. I'm going on tour. I don't know when you're going to release this podcast, but I'll be in Florida and New York in the next week or week and a half on tour with a great artist named Shalea. We're going to be playing at the Blue Note on March 2nd in New York. I'll be playing some tenor, actually. Kind of a different thing for me when I'm just touring without my alto. But she's a Quincy Jones artist. She's great. And there's a lot of really cool projects that are going to be released this year. I'm working on some collaborations with Larry Goldings that we're going to release. A new record that I'm doing, hopefully produced by the great Terrace Martin. There's a lot of things, very exciting things in the works. But until then, I hope that people can enjoy the music that I put out and connect with me on Instagram at Danny Janklow. My website is dannyjanklow.com. DannyJanklow. Danny Janklow Music at Facebook.com. Danny Janklow at Twitter. I try to stay active as I can. Instagram seems to be the most active social media network that I'm on and that most people are on. Feel free to message me, honestly. Jeff hit me up on Instagram. He also emailed me, but those are the best ways to get in contact with me if you want to ask me questions or take Skype lessons or whatever it is, however you want to connect. I'm happy to do that. I'm also happy to sell charts, sell CDs. Somebody bought a chart of mine yesterday of Bad Reception for their senior recital. That happens pretty often. You know what I mean? I'm happy to help. You know what I mean? If it means that you're gonna play my music the right way, I'm happy to help. You know what I mean? I'd rather you play my chart than a transcription that's wrong. So I'm just really glad that we got together, and I'm happy that some of these ideas and conversations are being had. Not everything that I said is easy to hear. Not everything is digestible. I understand that a lot of people that are not Black have a hard time coming to terms with that this is Black music. I realize that I talk about that in a very serious way, and sometimes people don't understand where I'm coming from. But I hope that you know, and I hope that if you've watched this interview, that you know that this music is for everyone, but it's about giving credit where credit is due. And people have died for this music, and we're sitting here talking about them and honoring them, as well as continuing in that legacy. So I just really appreciate that we can have honest conversations in 2020. It's very important.
Yeah. Well, thank you again, Danny. Thanks for making the time, and looking forward to doing this again in the future.
My pleasure, Jeff. Thank you.